Despite being for people of all ages, Pokemon games can get very complex and extensive at times. So much so, in fact, that the games simply aren't able to tell you about everything that they have to offer. The interesting thing about this is that some of this stuff is actually very interesting and fascinating. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at some secret things in Pokemon games that the games don't tell you about. Okay, so the first thing on our list that the Pokemon games don't tell you is how absolutely soft and adorable my Folkachi plushie is, and how, when you pick one up at HoopsandHipHop.com with the link in the description below, you also get a free limited edition Folkachi promo card as well for the upcoming Histrobi Chronicles TCG. The games don't say a word about how beautiful this card is either, and how it is as good looking as any TCG card I have ever seen. And on top of that, this promo is the only way you're going to be able to get it. The games genuinely don't tell you this at all. Picking up a plush and a card also immensely supports the channel too, videos just like this, and next level content being possible like my Histrobi Chronicles project, which is where Folkachi comes from. For real though, the plush and the card are genuinely amazing, and grabbing one makes such a huge difference for the channel in allowing it to go to the next level and keep videos happening. Not to mention, the products are also just really cool too. So pick up a plush and a card at HistrobiShop.com with the link in the description below, and thank you guys so much as always for all of your amazing support. Starting things off, one of the most curious things to ever occur in a Pokemon game concerns Kadabra. Because as of Generation 3, if Kadabra is traded while holding an Everstone, it will still evolve into Alakazam regardless of the Everstone's intended effect. Initially, when this first occurred in Generation 3, it was the result of a glitch and also affected other trade Pokemon like Haunter, Graveler, and Machoke. However, in Generation 4, while this error was fixed for those other Pokemon, Kadabra is still able to evolve when traded even if it's holding an Everstone, showing an apparent degree of intent for this occurring outside of it just being a glitch, which makes this all the more interesting and curious. One thing in this category of things that the games don't tell you about that I personally found pretty interesting is that in Pokemon Yellow, the Pokemon that Blue's Eevee will evolve into is actually dependent on your first two battles with him, and therefore can be controlled by the player. Eevee will evolve into Jolteon if you beat Blue in both your first battle at Professor Oak's lab and in the second optional battle on Route 22 just outside of Viridian City. Meanwhile, it will evolve into Flareon if you win the Professor Oak battle, but lose or skip the Route 22 battle, and it will evolve into Vaporeon if you lose the first battle at Oak's lab, regardless of the outcome of the second battle. What's even more interesting about this is that based on these events and the evolution that Blue gets, the evolution seems to be a conscious choice by Blue rather than just a random assignment by the game. This is because, in the case of you beating him twice and him getting Jolteon, for example, this could be seen as Blue wanting to have an electric-type ace just like you have with Pikachu, to try and mimic what you've been doing in order to grab some of that success that you have been having. While, when you lose that first battle to him and he ends up getting Vaporeon, who has a weakness to Pikachu, this could be seen as a classic case of Blue's cockiness, showing that he's not really concerned about the type matchup and believes that he can beat you anyway, since he beat you that first time. It could also just be the game's way of adjusting the difficulty for the player based on these first battles, but it being Blue's choice from a story perspective admittedly sounds a lot cooler. Another wild thing about evolution that the games won't prepare you for involves evolving Cottony into Whimsicott. Since Cottony evolves via a Sunstone, if you attempt to evolve it at level 1, upon evolving into Whimsicott, it will attempt to learn up to 22 moves all at the same time, depending on which moves the Cottony already knows. This is because Whimsicott does not learn any moves by level up itself, and all of the moves it is programmed to learn, it's programmed to learn at level 1. Meaning that in the unique event that you actually do evolve a Cottony at level 1, you'll end up triggering this extremely unique scenario. It's commonly known by Pokemon players, both new and old, that if you try to attack a Pokemon that has used Fly or Dig, your move is gonna miss because these Pokemon are naturally either up in the air or in the ground. However, there are actually an extensive amount of circumstances involving these situations that allow you to not only hit Pokemon in these scenarios, but even do extra damage on top of what you would normally be able to do. For example, a Pokemon who's flying can still be hit by moves such as Gust, Twister, Thunder, Whirlwind, Sky Uppercut, Hurricane, Smackdown, and Thousand Arrows. And Gust and Twister in particular will also do double damage upon hitting a Pokemon that has used Fly. Pokemon who have used Dig, meanwhile, can still be hit by the moves Fissure, Earthquake, and Magnitude, and will get dealt double the damage from Earthquake and Magnitude. Even Pokemon using Dive can still be hit, as they'll still be able to be hit by the moves Whirlpool and Surf, and will also take double damage from them as well. Lastly, kind of on the flip side of things, as of Generation 6, the move Toxic will never miss when used by a Poison-type Pokemon, and will even hit Pokemon who are using moves such as Fly or Dig. This next thing isn't mentioned in the games because it's more of a game design thing than an actual mechanic, but it's possible that the starters in Legends Arceus might actually be a reference to Cynthia, who is obviously one of the keyest of key characters in the Sinnoh games. This is because the regions that these Pokemon are from, Johto, Unova, and Alola, are the exact same regions that we know Cynthia has traveled to outside of Sinnoh. She went to Johto, sort of, via the Sinjoh Ruins event in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Unova in Black and White, and Alola within the Battle Tree in Sun and Moon. Speaking of Sinnoh, there is actually an interesting thing in one of the original Sinnoh games that most players will completely miss. In Pokemon Platinum, the normal track of the game has you going to Celestic Town, where you get the HM4 Surf, which then grants you access to Canalave City. However, if you go off the beaten path and somehow manage to access the far side of Route 218 before this, your path to Canalave City will be blocked by a group of Pikachu and Clefairy. Due to only being present in Platinum and being well outside the normal path of the game, most people would never even see this, so it makes for an interesting tidbit. In X and Y, a secret feature that is super simple, but still fun nevertheless, due to its hidden nature, is that you can actually sit on the big mushroom that is outside of the gym in Laverre City. This next one comes from Gold and Silver, and it is one of the most obscure hidden features in Pokemon of all time. There is actually a way to reset the in-game clock in these games, but it is weirdly complicated. First, while on the title screen, you need to press down, select, and B. This will pull up a secret screen where you can then reset the clock. However, this is where things get super weird, because in order to actually reset the clock, you have to put in a password, and this password is essentially a random code that is determined by your trainer's name, your trainer ID, and the amount of money you currently have. This has easily got to be one of the most befuddling mechanics in a Pokemon game ever, because not only do you need a passcode to do this, which is already weird enough, but back in the days of Gen 2, there is no way any normal person would know how to get the correct code or where it's coming from. These days, there are generators online that you can use to figure out your code for you, but honestly, I was not even able to figure out how exactly this code is generated and how it uses your name, ID, and money in order to do so, and what exactly that overall system entails. So there is like no way on earth that your average kid in the early 2000s was gonna be able to figure this out. Maybe that was kind of the point, but then why would they even have this feature in the game at all? Like I said, this is definitely one of the most interesting and obscure hidden features in Pokemon history. Something else that's also kind of wild has to do with the moves Self-Destruct and Explosion. These are two of the most powerful moves in the games, having a base power of 200 and 250 respectively. Even if they end up fainting your Pokemon, that is still a pretty powerful attack, but what the games don't tell you is that prior to Generation 5, these moves also halved the defense of your opponent when in use, making these moves incredibly busted as that effectively doubled their strength and gives them a base power of 400 and 500 respectively, making them far and away the strongest moves in the games, as the next closest move in terms of power is V-Create with a base power of just 180. So while it's not always a good thing when Game Freak removes features from older games for newer games, it was probably a good idea that they decided to put a stop to this particular feature in Generation 5. And speaking of the pre-Gen 5 era, Generations 3 and 4 obviously were a key chunk of that time frame, and in Generation 3, we saw the introduction of Double Battles. In Double Battles, you obviously have more going on with two Pokemon out at once, and as such, the in-game displays are altered a little bit in order to save screen space. This includes your Pokemon's HP bars, which exclude the numerical amount of health your Pokemon has during double battles, once again in order to save space. However, if you press the start button in a Gen 3 or Gen 4 game, you can actually toggle between the HP bar and your numerical HP value, which is a pretty neat and useful feature. Are there any features like this that you know about that I haven't mentioned though? Let me know down in the comments below, and be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more. You can also support the channel further if you would like in videos just like this by checking out my Pokemon remixes over on Spotify or wherever you get your music, and you can also check out my Patreon, which is linked in the description below, and also get some cool exclusive perks in return. With that said, I'll be back very soon with another new video, and until then, as always, thank you guys so much for all your support and for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.